7 o'clock, so let's get started. First up is we have a request by Northeast Solar Design for a special permit for ground-mounted solar panels at 218 Audubon Road, Leeds, map ID 10-16. Presentation, I presume?
No, not much of one. Just if you had any questions revolving it, it's a ground-mounted, twin-axis solar, ground-mounted solar array. It's a tracking system, and it's to be built in the area. It surpasses the zoning requirements based upon the square footage of the system overall. It spans 16 foot at its widest point when it's at a tabletop design, where it sleeps at night. When it wakes up, it's GPS enabled. It wakes up and it tracks the sun throughout the day. So all the design specs and everything are included in the packet. Request that you approve the installation of it. The customer's very happy about it. We're excited to watch their system track the sun.
Yeah.
So this system is roughly 100% of the house itself and not all that much more.
Correct. Yeah.
How tall does it stand?
10 foot in tabletop, and it'll stand a total of 18 feet fully at the 90 degree. It doesn't get much more above 16 feet. And that would be at its winter axis. It's designed to, if there's any sustained gusts over 30 miles an hour for greater than 15 seconds, it's got an anemometer on it, it goes back and sleeps. So it reduces the stress on it. When it snows, when it sleeps, when it gets piled with snow, it wakes up, turns to 60 degrees, sheds the snow, goes back to sleep. It could be programmed in a snow mode remotely by computer, so during a really heavy snowstorm, it'll just stay up and rotate at 60 degrees, keep the snow off it. Fairly intelligent PV system.
Yeah. Any questions? This is, I think, at least the third, if not the fourth.
We'll be back a couple more times.
Yeah.
Getting smarter.
Yeah, I know. So you're raising the bar.
Can you say your name again? Sorry.
Gregory Garrison.
No questions? Open up to the public. Is anyone here from the public that wishes to speak on this? No? Okay.
Just one question. So, based on the conversation we had last time with Louis and I can't remember the gentleman, Energy, Chris. This would be one of the ones that we would it be by right if we go along with what they're recommending? That there wouldn't even be a site plan for this?
Right. So that's in the, well, yeah, so the changes actually in the A, B, and C district that I sent out to you have sort of, there are three classifications. One, if it's over a parking lot. Two, if it's detached, you know, it's a detached accessory structure, but only providing energy for that. It's as an accessory use would be by right. And then the, you know, super generators, the ones that are more than necessary, would still be a special permit.
And so this, because it hits the setbacks and because of the percentage of open space, if we did these changes, this would just be by right, that we wouldn't come to us at all.
Right.
Cool.
Close public comment.
Oh, Brandy's.
Oh, Brandon.
Did you say what the power output was going to be in this?
This one specifically, the power output, let's see, this is 16, this is going to be about 6 kW nameplate rating, 6,000 watts. That'll put out close to 9,000 kilowatt because of the tracking. It's about 40% more than a fixed system. That's the benefit of it.
Is it powered itself?
Yes.
And how much,
Generator.
how does that compare to what the house requires?
Oh, it's, for this particular house, I think it's less than 80%. We typically don't build greater than 80% of the load, even if the client wants it. We want to promote conservation as well as sustainability. So it's a dual benefit by keeping the threshold.
Move to close public comment?
Second hand. All in favor? Any discussion? This is pretty clean and moving toward not having to burden the applicant, I think, for systems like this, having to come in front of us, because it seems pretty straightforward.
Well, and there, would we have notified the abutters?
Yeah. And yellow sign.
Can I get a motion?
I move we approve the Northeast Solar for special permit at 218 Audubon Road, map 1016.
Second.
All in favor? Good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Get a cold?
That's such a baby. I can't even blame my son.
Odds and ends.
Sick.
So,
I have. Yeah, but actually, what's interesting, well, no, I think, let's look at the zoning for a second, because he said that that would go up to 9 kilowatts, and I think last time we talked about 8. So I just want to see what the language is in here. If you
we
think.
talked about
Well, last 2 weeks ago, when we talked about making changes to the PV provisions, I think the number, the 8 kilowatts was thrown around.
I thought we decided to do it by, like an accessory structure, by
It's
the
8
square
kilowatts.
footage, not by the power.
Well, it was sort of both to understand how much more beyond what was the need for the demand for the home. No more than 100% or 8 kilowatts, so they know. So maybe that should be changed to say no more than 100% as opposed to a kilowatt maximum. If he's saying that
Yeah.
goes to 9, but it's 80% of the demand.
I actually really appreciated that not setting it at 100% logic.
Right.
Yeah.
But
But in terms of the zoning, I wouldn't want to say, you know, if someone comes in and says, it goes to 9 kilowatts, and we say, and it says, well, it says or, I guess whichever is.
But
Yeah.
why have the 8 kW there? Why not just say 100%?
Yeah, we could do that. Then, because it might change too, I mean,
Right.
if you can,
Depends on the size of the lot you're talking about in the house, doesn't it?
Well,
Right,
we still
depends
have
on
to
the
get the
size.
setbacks and all the other open space requirements of an accessory structure. So, it's not like you couldn't cover your lawn, because you need the side rear setbacks. But,
But we were trying to limit it based on
it's like a barn, like a size, not.
size,
power.
not capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think, and either Chris or Louis said last week, is, 5 years from now, when they double the efficiency of those panels,
Right.
Right.
and you replace your panels, do you have to tear down half of them because of power, or just do it by size and then?
Because wouldn't that take away some of the incentive of having it in the first place?
Getting rid of the,
the kilowatt.
You did by
Yeah.
power?
Yeah.
Yeah, the worry though is, and there should be, might be a maximum percentage, because you still don't want people turning their lawns into power plants. So
No.
it could be
But you don't want them
Up
to
to-
be punished by.
like future technology.
Right, yeah, right,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's it.
right, so.
Because you can't expect the building inspector to go out
Right.
every time somebody replaces their panels and throw a meter on it.
And why do I not want them to turn their lawn into a power plant? If they've got great, I mean, this is a perfect example of a lawn that.
Well, it would be allowed by special permit, but you'd want to look at that,
Yeah.
is the issue.
Right, the difference between like personal use and like what we're seeing in Hadley and Northampton and Amherst, it's people get a little more worried when you create a farm, a solar farm or like an installation.
Right.
We should have a little sign that goes in front of the camera that says, pause
like
until
a little-
7:15.
Right.
dancing hot dog. Right in the middle.
Maybe you should just say.
It's not
Right.
so rare.
Yeah, we don't have anything else that's tiny that we can, in 3 minutes review.
2 minutes.
Do the map changes in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I know. You wanted me to hear me say that, do anything.
You know they make me say that you need to try to keep people from doing it.
Just see what
I
happens.
can report that CPA made their proposals for round 2 funding last night. I think was,
Yeah, you want to go over that?
Yeah. What's moving forward?
there's a really nice project to reinstall the historic fountain on Hospital Hill. They've got the fountain. I think it's in some DPW yard and in Ned's desk and in all sorts of places. They have to refurbish that.
Yeah.
The ball fields down at the skate park,
Mhm.
90-foot ball field. Invasive plants.
Wait, where's the ball field?
Behind the skate park.
Oh, okay.
It was always intended to be a
Baseball or
yeah,
soccer?
Vets Field.
That's called Veterans Field, yeah.
The 190 for Wayne's Bodie House project with Lane Construction. That's contingent on park grant money, the way they put the consideration on it.
Right.
And refunded Conservation Commission and APR to some degree. Conservation Commission was completely out of money. And that's for soft money. That's it.
Can you talk about why Valley didn't get theirs, from your perspective?
There was a lot of concern, and it wasn't from my perspective. I voted for it.
What was the vote?
4-3. It was an unusual discussion. It's a new kind of function to be paying for a service.
Right, with
There
the
was-
changes in the amendment, in the.
There was thought that it was kind of like, it would become a continuing requirement, if you pay for this and you staff it and then you have to come back and do it again. But the real kicker was real-time looking up a $500,000 grant that had gone through an organization in Springfield that would give money to CDC. And
How did you find out about that? Was that confirmed, or?
one of the members on the commission mentioned it, and while we were there, Dave looked it up, and and we thought that was a game changer that we probably should have been at least informed about. It happened. I mean, it wasn't hidden. It happened between the time the submission came in and the vote, but it was doing exactly the same thing as the requested project.
Oh, you guys did the final votes on the CPA?
Yeah,
So that's many, many rounds of nothing for housing, right?
it is,
Yeah.
and we have a set aside that.
Yeah, right, 10%, yeah. This must be a fair amount of money in it at this point.
It is, and the reason I voted for it was because of that, and because it makes sense to me to keep somebody from being homeless as opposed to trying to spend money to build houses. I mean, it's very expensive. The housing projects are big projects.
Right, right.
So, but I understood everyone's, I understood the other concerns too. And the one thing that we did not do is that there was no will for repairing the 3 city buildings that were put before us. This one and the municipal building and the one next
We
door.
had capital planning, we wrapped up capital planning last night, and the 3 buildings were, requested for funds for that. But it's contingent on if they got any money through CPA.
Yeah, I actually tried starting out with a proposal to do the municipal building, because I think it is a historic building and I don't want it to go into any more water disrepair.
Right.
But it was really, the proposals were written, it was so obvious they were deferred maintenance, it was hard to get real historic about them.
Right. Okay, all set? Round 2, it is 7:16 or so. I'd like to open up a request by Colvest for site plan amendment at 327 King Street, Northampton. Map ID 24B-. Jump right in. Can I get, yep.
I'm Mark Darnell from Berkshire Design, representing Covest, and we're here for a site plan amendment. This project was approved back in October 2010. And consisted of essentially 60,000 square feet of retail, plus a bank, plus a Firestone expansion. What we're simply proposing to do now is to add some parking on the north side of the building. Currently, there's an old gravel driveway and some gravel area there. We want to actually pave it, make it nice, make it look good, and accommodate, which hopefully there's a new tenant coming in on the north side of the building, which is going to accommodate about 22,000 square feet of that building. Currently, it's approved as retail, commercial, and we're going to propose to put in the medical offices in that location. The new parking lot area there, under the new highway business district, is in full compliance with that. We provided the parking lot layout, the landscaping, the sidewalks going to it, the lighting. You have lighting diagrams in there as well. It's in full compliance with the new regulations. Make sure they accommodate that. The traffic according to site plan approval criteria for commercial is about 12 vehicles per 1,000 square feet. That's the generation rate. For the medical, it would be 5, so in theory, it would be reducing the approved traffic impacts significantly. There's already been traffic mitigation for the existing site plans. Proposed traffic would be less than that. So we're saying there's no additional traffic with this change and adding to the parking lot. The drainage on the site, we originally came to you. The project was exempt from stormwater management because we were disturbing less than an acre of area. Since that point in time, the construction has expanded. We did receive a stormwater permit from the city for the project. Based upon this change, we've applied to this DPW for amendment to that stormwater permit, and we have received that amended stormwater permit as well. So that's taken up at the moment. Lighting again is in compliance. Again, the way we got the stormwater permit amendment was the total area of pavement on this site is less than the total area of pavement on the site prior to the original application. And we are making improvements to the drainage, putting in some catch basins, stormwater treatment, so the stormwater is in better shape than what it was before. So we look at this as an amendment to the plan. We don't think it's a major change, other than the fact that the parking lot that we're putting in, we're adding the landscaped islands, we're adding walkways, and we're trying to be in compliance. Well, we're not trying to be. We are in compliance with the new highway business landscape guidelines as well. So again, amendment to an existing plan. We don't see that there's any major concerns, but we obviously leave that decision up to the board.
Questions?
No. I assume previously when we talked about it, that was where you were going to put your snow in the winter. That lot. So what are you planning to do with it now?
Well, we still have areas, off to the little bit to the north, to the west here. We still have some areas up in this location. We still have a fairly good buffer zone next to the old Cole Morgan site. And again, we will pile snow, and if it gets too much, it can always be hauled off, as is in other areas. So we're not intending to put it in a sensitive area. There are no wetlands around. Any drainage that goes off goes into our site treatment system as well.
Have you, can you give me the percentage of coverage in the lot? You're saying it's less now because you're adding islands, but this is a pretty big area that's gone from gravel to...
Right. Well, again, I just want to make sure that it's not very easy to see, but on this area photo, there is a fairly large amount of pavement in this area already. We're adding all this in this location here. We're adding islands, and a significant portion of this is already paved. But we do have exact areas, it's not a huge change. The pre-existing, prior to anything, impervious area was 238,756 square feet. And the proposed impervious is 238,492 square feet. It's not much, but we are less than the pre-existing condition.
I assume these are, I'm sorry, Steve.
No, go ahead.
The islands in the parking lot area are going to be built up. They aren't rain basins, are they?
No, they're not. No, the site is not really conducive to that, so we have a little raised area. We tried not to change the grading. It was graded to be nice, so we didn't want to make a lot of, we want to, plus the fact that the building is already there, the area is already there, we didn't have really a lot of opportunity to do that. Soils there are not conducive to the garden application.
Did you, I know we didn't have a lighting plan, but the lighting levels, I can't tell if there's poles, where the poles are gonna be?
Yes, the poles are shown on the plan, and we also have a lighting, ISO lighting plan that was submitted.
Just a second.
We can point them out if you.
There was a tree. No, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a light pole here,
Yeah,
here, there's one in this island here,
yeah. Oh, okay.
and there's one on this island here.
So you guys are hitting 0 at the bounders?
Yeah, I believe we have, again, included the lighting diagram. ISO camera.
Yeah, the sheets in front of you are just the sheets that got changed, so.
Oh, okay.
Original.
Yeah, all right. And then,
No, that's,
so is there gonna be, on the north side of the building, Mark, are you putting in a new entrance for that office?
There is right now, we're proposing one entrance to this location, it will probably more of an employee entrance. The main entrance for this area would be through the front. But this here primarily would be, right now, it's anticipated to be, again, it's shown right here as a new door inside on that side.
Right, so that's an employee entrance, not for the major, the people going to the office. And I was wondering, I was also looking for bike racks, if you're putting in the new entrance.
We did not add any additional bike racks on here.
Yep.
We had the original bike racks, I forgot where they are now.
That's, I was looking for them on the plan as well, I don't see the loops.
Where we put them.
Because I think there was some on the north corner, and I think there was some on the south corner, because the bike trail was coming in on the south side.
I think we had some, I believe we had them down in this island area. I think they were down in this location here, if I remember right.
Yeah, so that's why
There's two off the sidewalk on the west side.
West side.
but wasn't there some on
Been a while since we looked
Like
on
those
this.
here.
the northwest corner? Wasn't there bike loops on the northwest corner?
The northwest.
The north, oh, that would be, my
That's
gosh,
north.
the lower left corner of the building.
Down here,
No, the main
Oh,
building.
the building.
here.
Yeah, I think, wasn't there gonna be bike loops in the lower left corner?
I don't remember there being, again, it was a year and a half ago.
I know, that's why I'm trying to, I'm just looking for them, and that's where I can't. I thought we talked about putting them in the lower left corner, or close to the,
I think I see two little.
yeah, but they're not labeled as,
They're not labeled.
they're not labeled as, I see the loops with an arrow pointing to them,
Yeah,
but they're not labeled as bike racks.
Yeah, the arrow,
Yeah, they are, but there's something written on top.
yeah, it says bike loops, 2 on existing concrete. It's just written over, but they're
It's
there.
written over, and the arrow goes down to them.
Yeah.
this is a render plan, so I don't see this one.
Yeah, I see the arrow, I just can't find the
We
text.
tried everything on this plan is really to highlight from the
Bike,
changes.
it's a bike, it has a
Right.
wheelchair on top of it.
Yeah, but
See the round hashed.
Yeah, I see the two loops, I think, that's what I thought they were, I just was trying to find the. And the dumpsters, you're adding were the dumpsters on the original plan too?
This corner over here,
Right. Those weren't on the original plans, I don't think,
and we have actually two sets of dumpsters here.
right?
and there's some on the other
There's some
corner.
over here.
Yeah, we have some. Right.
Well, effectively, so you're subdividing the building, so there's the left, the 1/3 of the building, the north third of the building will become the medical office,
Correct.
and the 2/3, the southern 2/3. Okay, oh, so that's no tenants yet for
As
that.
of yet, we have no tenants.
Right, okay. Carolyn, did the change in zoning that we made, oh, sorry, Frandy. No, did the change in zoning we made to King Street make it so medical offices were by right? Because wasn't it King Street up
Right.
until a year ago? They
Right.
needed a special permit for medical office?
Yep.
Mark, could you go over the calculation, how you arrived at the 313 parking places you want to have?
Well, that's how many we have proposed.
Yeah, how did you arrive at
But
that
why do
figure?
we have so many? Rather than the, well, I guess it's to accommodate, I guess this will be close, and why this is gonna be, mostly employee parking on this side. We wanted to have this area, we have a high turnover rate, we have a parking area we share with Firestone, so this area here is gonna be utilized by Firestone. And we want employee parking to be here, and so we didn't want to encumber this area here for the turnover rate for the plant, so this is the parking requirements are minimum that the city requires. I think this is what's going to work best for this facility.
Okay. Now, does the shared parking included in that figure?
Well, Firestone is same property owner. They have a lease here, so they are shared with the parking here.
I mean, are they included in that number or not?
Yes, this parking is for this entire parcel.
Okay.
Open up to the public. Is there anyone here from the public who'd like to speak about this? No? Close public hearing.
Do you need any more information? Is that parking, number of parking spaces reasonable?
Yeah, so what we did in the Highway Business District is eliminate the parking requirements. So we're basically leaving it up to the applicants to determine what's going to work from a marketing perspective. There isn't any impact in terms of spillover to neighborhood. So I think, you know, the idea was to let them determine what would work.
Okay, well, we often want fewer parking places than the applicant asks for. And I didn't know whether, I just want to know whether it's a reasonable number.
I don't have any way of making that determination. I guess I would say that the idea was that then we wouldn't get involved in the analysis as to whether it's appropriate. I mean, the bottom line is we want to make sure the landscaping meets the standards. And to the extent that they do that, then they can put the parking, configure the parking the way that it works for them. And we also know that medical has there's more demand for medical uses. So we would anticipate that if there's a change from retail to medical, that would generate a demand for additional parking.
I think if you're going to leave it up to the developer to determine how many parking spaces works for them, then it wouldn't be reasonable to.
I mean, I understand the concept, but what if they came in and wanted 600 parking places? Some people, you know, like if it were a church or something.
You have to knock down the building.
No,
No, I know what you mean.
the tendency with some developers would be to fill up every available square foot of space with parking, and I didn't, that now, under the current zoning, it doesn't seem to be there's any limit.
Well, I think when we did the zoning, I think the idea was King Street, you know, north of Stop and Shop. I can't remember what the dividing line is between.
The bike path.
Is it the bike
Yeah.
path?
Yeah.
So north of the King Street on the bike path, we weren't going to put in numbers, but we were going to put in the design requirements, the landscaping requirements, how much parking you can have in front of the building. Now, if this was a new building, I'm not quite sure if they could put the building where it is, based on that zoning, so. But with the addition of the traffic light, if there's anywhere on King Street where the site can handle traffic, I'm not sure when the traffic light has to go in. I mean, when the warrants kick in for the traffic light. But I think if there's a site where we're gonna have a lot of traffic and a lot of parking, this is the site on King Street. This or Stop and Shop.
I was also speaking more in general, there doesn't seem to be any, but it's all right.
No, I hear it, because it's basically, it's a building surrounded by parking. You know, the kind of things that
we were trying to get away from. But I think when the applicant came here 2 years ago, we got a lot of concessions on their part by putting the pad at the front where the bank's going, by putting in the buffering on King Street, by increasing the width of the sidewalk. Once we couldn't move the building. And landscaping. And landscaping, yeah.
But I mean, I think ultimately this is better than it was. And it's a reasonable, I think it's a reasonable use of that space for that, if that, a third of that building or more is gonna be for a tenant, and that's predominantly gonna be staff parking. That seems to be, to me, a reasonable use.
Well, and I'm actually happy that the stormwater management was reviewed, because that was a piece of the last time that.
Right, because it didn't have to be.
Right.
Right.
But if this was a new building, if they came to us with this plan, then I think we'd have a much longer discussion
Right.
about is this really what the way we'd want it.
Absolutely.
But knowing, as we do, that the building is the building, that's not gonna be moved.
So I'm just taking by a rule of thumb that's 12 vehicles per 1,000 square feet.
I think that's high for low or medium.
Sounds high.
But I guess that was the other thing, because on King Street, when we did the rezoning, theoretically, somebody could take a lot and put a building on it and provide 0 parking. And that
Right.
would be allowed now. And it's the developer, I guess we decided north of the bike trail, that it's the developer should know what their building needs for parking. We're not going to enforce a ratio, kind of like what we do downtown now, downtown.
Right.
In our town,
It's-
there's no parking. You can put a building up and there's no parking. It is,
Right.
I know, it is, I know.
Yeah.
But I guess we went through a lot with this to
Yes, we did.
get the buffering on King Street and all the things we got when the project came through us 2 years ago. That's right. And the traffic light.
Okay, public comment's still open.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second, all in favor? Motion.
We approved a request by Coles for site plan amendment for 327 King Street, map 24B-38.
Second.
Boy.
I just have, you said you thought it was 1 per 12 per
12 per
thousand?
1,000.
Like just in that one side of the lot, you're saying?
Kind of rule of thumb, it just caught my attention.
Oh.
It didn't mean
Oh,
it.
not what they have on there.
No.
I was trying to, I missed that because I was trying to rectify that. I was like, that's not 1 per 12. Yeah.
Well, I think it's strange we have no way of judging whether that's a reasonable amount of parking. And to say that we trust the developer to come up with the figure they need, that's
Classy.
I know. It works.
Yeah, here it is.
It's like a whole letter from the college days.
And in this case, I think they intend to do that all along.
But it even gives you a little storage space, you know, you can.
You could be onto a new thing.
Yeah.
That could be your next craft.
Yeah.
I'll be bringing my old empty rolls.
Right, right.
I'll decoupage them out.
There was some old movie Showtime, it was about a mall, and these 2 guys had bought this crappy mall, and they were trying to renovate it. And one of the stores was a used toilet paper store.
Yeah, yeah.
The guy, that was his thing.
You watched this?
Steve, I was going to say, stop right there.
I did,
I know.
was
Watch
like,
that.
I
This
can't,
is,
I
this
get
is
in,
so bad.
I have to watch it just to see if it's really as bad as it seems. Like, it has to get better. It can't be this bad.
You're so helpful.
And it never, it's always that bad. So this next review, is this
Yes.
a public review, an internal review?
So the next item on the agenda is a comprehensive permit that was submitted for property at the VA, and the role of the planning board is not permitting authority, but it's recommendations to the zoning board. Because a comprehensive permit is a permit that's issued by the zoning board, and I can go into the details, after, in a minute. But I just wanted to say, so what happens tonight is that you review it, staff can provide, detailed information about it. The applicant's representative is here as well to answer questions, if you have questions, particularly as it relates to the site. So your role tonight is really to give a recommendation. It's not a public hearing, because the zoning board is the official body that would hold the public hearing. So this is really a technical review, to give feedback to the zoning board, sort of in your planning board expertise hat, that you normally typically review these things. But because you're not granting the permit, you're not holding the public hearing. So you're going to be sending along your recommendations to the zoning board. And before we start, I don't know if you all know, but Anne is actually in a butter to the project, so she can participate in the actual public hearing of the zoning board, but can't participate in the conversation here because she's in a butter, so.
I'm gonna sit out there.
Okay. I'll give you the high sign when we're done.
You must lose it.
And this is because it's a 40B project, right?
It's a 40B project, which means necessarily that at least 25, so anybody who's pitching a project under 40B has to show that they're building at least 25% of the units as designated affordable units, meeting the area median income requirements, or 80% of the area median income. And then those developers also have to be approved by the state, at the state level, to even put forth an application. So the developer, the soldier on, and there's an entity, an LLC or nonprofit, that got that designation from the state. And then the idea is that if 40B was established, just to refresh everybody's memory, or if you didn't know it, was established as a mechanism to ensure that communities around the Commonwealth had at least a baseline of 10% of all their residential units as meeting those local area median income requirements, so that we weren't essentially an income segregated state. And what happens is, if you're a community that doesn't have 10% of your units as affordable, then an applicant can come in and file under 40B for a project that could not comply with any of the underlying zoning requirements of that community. And if it's denied, they have the ability to appeal it to a housing court, essentially, State Housing Appeals Board, that then can determine the project. So basically taking all the jurisdiction of the local government out of the picture. And in Northampton, we have a little over 11% affordable units. So we're not in the position of having major developers coming in and saying, we're going to do whatever we want because you don't meet your housing requirements, so we're going to have, the zoning board has to waive all the rules for us. So we've done, over the years, lots of what we call friendly 40B projects, where we work with the applicant to locate in areas that make sense, and if they make sense, then we'll entertain a comprehensive permit. And we ask that the applicants ask for the minimal number of waivers from zoning, because we want to make sure that it still meets our comprehensive plan and that it makes sense for the site and the neighborhood and all of that. So we have done several of these, nothing on this scale, not of these number of units before.
And for our part, what the applicant gets is the one-stop permit. That's the point.
Exactly.
That's right.
Right. Okay. And so instead of a separate stormwater permit, separate local wetlands permit, separate whatever, it all gets funneled to the zoning board, and the zoning board has the jurisdiction to waive any of that. So in this case, DPW will be sending its recommendations to the zoning board as well as it relates to stormwater. And I don't think there are no local wetlands issues right at the site. They're on the larger VA property, but, so I don't think that will be an issue, but we do get, whatever, we feed it into the departments, and the departments then send their comments on to the zoning board.
These will all be countable, right, under 40B?
Yes. Yeah, that's the other stipulation.
That's great.
And so that's another thing. The more units we have, then that elevates our percentage, so that we can maintain our ability to have, control over how we want our community to build out and not be told by someone else coming in. So in terms of this site, you probably have heard about this through the paper over the last several years. It's been sort of in the works, and this is housing targeted for veterans and disabled veterans. So, and given that, although it's a large number of units, it's right next to the VA where they can get services. It's also next to the bike path, so that there could be some integration in terms of the larger community. But we've always felt at a staff level that this was a good place for that type of housing, and it's part of the market that we're not addressing anyway.
So I probably should know this from the packet, but are they SROs or enhanced SROs or?
We're not calling them that. There's two different sort of groupings of units. So one is a transient housing for women. And the other is they're really small apartments. So, whether they're enhanced SROs or small apartments, I don't know what the distinction would be.
But no bigger than a one-bedroom then, or?
I think that's right. You might want to ask. Yeah, so the engineers here, but yes, I think that's the case. That, and so they're really meant for singles, essentially.
I thought there were the women and children.
Right, there might be options for, in the transient housing portion, I believe, and you can speak to that. It says in your application that.
Is it okay if I speak? For your record, my name is Jim Scalise. I'm an engineer at SK Design Group, a firm in Pittsfield. I'm also the owner's representative for Soldier-On, so I have a dual role. I'm in charge of all of Soldier-On's development in several communities. To answer your question, the transitional building is a 16-unit building, but it has flexibility. The units are set up such that if a veteran had children, that some of the units have loft space so that those children could stay. It's transient in that we expect folks to use this as a stopping place for a 12 to 24-month period while they establish themselves and are able to integrate back into the community. If I could add just one thing else, is that it is 100% affordable, this project. We're not at the percentage, we're 100%.
Yeah.
Carolyn?
Yeah.
What's the significance of the 300-foot
Buffer?
buffer that's?
So they essentially, so the other piece about this project is that they're leasing land from the VA, so they're not going to actually carve out any new property boundary. The 300-foot buffer is a buffer around the site as if it were a lot. So we require 300-foot, we require notice of abutters within 300 feet, and then abutters to abutters that are within 300 feet. So that line is really just showing essentially the abutter notification if it were a project on a separate parcel. We actually the VA parcel is so much bigger than this, and we would technically notify from the edge of the VA property line. So I need to look at that to make sure we're capturing everybody necessary based on the VA property line. So there might be some more additional notification requirements.
And is there any, I don't know if this came up before, but its proximity to a public school and the possibility of registered sex offenders being residents? Is there?
I can answer that. Under HUD rules, we're not allowed to have any sex offenders housed in the projects. So it's just not a possibility for us. We are funded through the VASH system, which is like a Section 8 type housing voucher for veterans, and that does not allow sex offenders. So we don't have any.
Is that true for the current shelter?
Not the current shelter, no. The current shelter beds are not VASH funded, they're per diem.
Okay, so, because I know I've seen in the notices in the paper, and I would be in a butter on the other side.
Yes, no, there's let's see, there's approximately 161 shelter beds as part of the hospital.
But that's a separate.
That's existing, and that is funded from a different program through the VA. But this particular type of funding doesn't allow that. We have similar questions and process in the city of Pittsfield where we go private, and it's just not.
And these are project-based Section 8 or VASH vouchers, they're not portable?
That has been our goal. It's not quite that simple. We have both right now in Pittsfield, but yes, we hope to have them project-based.
Okay.
Is there, I'm not sure if I understand the difference.
So the subsidy lives in the unit, so they can't, a Section 8 voucher you can take with you and use in private property to get a and you have a rent subsidy.
Yep.
If it's project-based, it stays with the unit.
Oh,
So
okay.
if somebody were to move out, they wouldn't be able to take the subsidy with them.
Yeah, okay.
It hasn't been an issue for us. We have 39 units now in Pittsfield, and in 2 years, we've had only 2 people leave, and one of the people that left passed away, so.
Wow, those are good numbers. And no evictions in that time?
No.
Wow,
That's good.
that's impressive.
Just a question, I'm not sure if this is a question for Carolyn or for the applicant. I know at one point there were several empty buildings at the VA, I think as you came up, the houses that are on the left. And they're the first building up on the right as you go up the long driveway. Is there, or are you guys aware what the long-term plan is for that site as a whole? Are those empty buildings or the buildings not being used being looked at as
Yes.
possible residences as well?
We have looked at that. I can tell you that the buildings on the left that you speak of, some of those are currently being used for women veterans now. The other building on the right, I think, is number 22. There's some asbestos issues with that building that we've looked at that a couple of times. We're very interested in that building. But it may have some obstacles that we're not able to fund ourselves through at this point. But this particular program is funded differently. It's kind of a national model. What we're trying to do is create a reproducible project that can be used at other VA campuses throughout the country. So we've actually went to San Antonio, for example. We looked, there's an enormous amount of housing on some of the bases there. But this type of program, it's modular, so it's reproducible, it's sustainable. We're trying to create like a test project here, and if successful, we want to reproduce it throughout the country.
Yeah, I was just wondering though, is the long-term plan to maintain that campus? I know that down in Holyoke there's a similar facility, but is it a long-term goal of I guess it would be the federal government to keep that campus in operation for the foreseeable future?
We have a 65-year lease, and we're getting $6.2 million from them, so we.
Oh, really? It's a 65-year lease for the site?
Yep, and they're giving us the majority. They're giving us $6.2 million to build it.
And will many of the residents be receiving services at the VA?
Absolutely. Part of our, I don't want to take over your meeting.
Yeah, no.
Very good.
Our program, that one of the key components of our program is we provide services where they live. So it's, our goal is to have everyone go to your apartment. I mean, we don't have service rooms. You need services, you need a case manager, you need help.
Oh, they'll be coming to the resident?
We go to the residents. Now, it's absolutely not possible to do that. If you need an x-ray, for example, then the VA is close by. And that symbiotic relationship with the VA is something they want to reproduce nationwide. Rather than pay medical bills at private hospitals, use those facilities that they already own. It makes a lot of sense.
Are there case management requirements associated with the lease?
There are. With the number of the program, particularly, yes, there'll be a minimum one case manager there, and then as the VASH goes, I believe we have a case manager.
But are the tenants required to accept services?
That's all part of our program.
Yeah. So it's in the lease, or?
Well, what happens is the folks that would be staying here, these units are cooperative units, and the tenants here actually own a share in a cooperative, so they actually own where they live. But these folks, I would say to you, are somewhat graduates from the other shelter. So folks would come into the shelter, 12 to 18 months of time there. They get through the program. To stay in the shelter, you have to sign an agreement. But as you kind of graduate to this more permanent housing model, it's more of a voluntary process as far as case management. But those folks are, they work on an average of 20 to 24 hours a week, and, you know, they really, there's a lot of rehabilitation going on, a lot of success stories.
Is there a time limit on how long they can stay?
No, not in the cooperative, not in the 44 units. I believe there's a 2-year limit on the transitional, the way it's funded. But we expect, honestly, there's, at our Pittsfield project, they want us to build a place to intern ashes because the folks want to stay there, and when they die, they want to stay there. So that's been our experience. In Pittsfield, 3 years ago. We have one permitted in Agawam that we're hoping to start in the spring, and we're hoping to start this one as, assuming permitting goes favorably.
So you've only had 2 change of residences in the permanent side of that
That's right.
facility in 3 years.
And one was, he passed away.
Very remarkable.
It's remarkable.
Yeah, for that, I think for that population, that's,
Well, I think it's partly the ownership, it's the skin in the game story.
it's the what?
The skin in the game sort of concept. Since it's a cooperative, they own.
What the heck is that?
No, you're right. I'll tell you, the maintenance at that facility is surprised all the funders. Our maintenance costs are extremely low because these guys own where they live.
Yeah, yeah.
They take care of it.
Question mark?
Yep.
The 16 transitional apartments are part of Phase 2. Do you guys have a timeline as when you get to building Phase 1 and Phase 2?
Yes, the VA funding is imminent. We actually are working with them on a weekly basis to meet their funding deadline, which is really the end of the year, with a closing hopefully by the end of January. So that's why that's Phase 1. We have about 50% of the funding committed for the Phase 2, and we expect that to come through in the spring. So very quickly, I mean, maybe within 6 months, maybe by July, I hope to break ground.
Phase 2. The reason I mean, this is more of a technical point, but it's kind of odd that Phase 2 is so far removed and you have to build, I haven't measured it, but is it about a 300-foot driveway to Phase 2?
Yeah, there's really 2 reasons for that. There's a very high percentage of female veterans who have had sexual assault issues in the military. Because of that, there's a very strong program need to have segregation among the 2 populations to give them security and safety. So that's the reason why that building is separated from the men's. The reason the driveway is so long is that this process has taken us so long. The VA had a design-build contractor install some utilities, which happened to run right through my building, which was very close to the site driveway when I first designed it, and I had to shift it inward into the site to avoid those now existing steam lines and water lines.
Well, that's why the driveway is.
That's why it's so long, yeah.
Because I was wondering, is there a Phase 3 and Phase 4 where you would intend to, add additional units either on the longer driveway or in between Phase 1 and Phase 2?
That potential may exist. There's no funding out there for that, so it's something that I looked at only from a MIPA perspective, just to, because to avoid the segmentation issue. But other than that, there's really been no. We'd love to build more units,
Right.
but we'd have to go through this process again, and we'd have to. And I think that would take a few years, honestly, for us to do that. So that's quite a ways out if that were to ever happen.
I think I might have misheard this. You're not saying that the units, the more permanent units, are just for men?
No, under fair housing, we don't limit it that way.
Okay.
But what we do is that we have to segregate the population so that there's women housing, for example, already on campus. So we have to keep them separate from a program perspective. But as far as do we limit how, if there was a woman veteran who was programming, from a program standpoint capable, then she would be eligible.
Okay.
So this, for us, it's basically a technical review where we're making recommendations to the zoning board.
Right.
So we need to look at it in that. lens. There are several on the staff comments that talked about lighting levels that exceed rural residential, and lamp details and so forth not shown. Did they get a heads up on these yet?
I did.
I have a copy of them, and we're working diligently with our lighting consultant on this. He tells me that 0.8-foot candles is a full moon, so it's a very low level of light, which we understand is important to the community. At the same time, we have a frail and elderly population, many of which are disabled, so we want to make it safe. So we just like to be able to keep the conversation open and understanding that, there's criteria that we have to meet, but at the same time be respectful of the population we're trying to serve.
I think, just as a rule of thumb, I think, 5-foot candles, I think, is what we require at a gas station. So 4.5 is.
Oh, I hear
It's
you.
very
loud-
bright.
I hear you loud and clear. Where I'm at right now, the last version I heard that I just rejected from our lighting consultant was about 1.2 under the light with a 30-watt bulb, but it's still a little over. So I'm trying to come up with some creative ideas, but I'm much closer, and I'm trying to respect your, but I'd love to keep that open in case
It has the potential, just because of where it sits, to be
Yeah, and I'd like to keep
low
some.
off in the distance.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep some light on the parking spaces. I have no need to light the driveway. I think that's a good comment. I'd like to keep some lighting on the spaces in that when folks are getting in and out of their cars, particularly there's a lot of handicap spaces. So in those instances, it's helpful, I think, to have some light, even very low level light, on the parking spaces themselves.
And it seems like you would need to have some consideration about that with the abutters at Bear Hill.
Yeah, we have a pretty good setback there,
Okay.
in my opinion, but again, we're working on it. We're working on it.
Because I know, well, one, because it'll change during the year. It'll be one thing in the summer and a different
Sure.
in the winter.
But even in our initial lighting plan, there was 0-foot candles quite a distance from the property line. And that's gone down significantly since then, so.
And then the point, though, about exterior, are there going to be exterior lights on the buildings as well as you're planning on the
Yeah,
poles?
I've involved our architect in the lighting design here, and he's put the fixtures on the building now, and that's all coming together.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've just received an email while I was waiting in this hearing that I'm supposed to have an answer tomorrow. So very soon, I hope to have information to submit, at least to the zoning board.
How about to the point on the parking, that we've got more parking than is required?
Yeah, the parking issue, there's an existing 23 spaces there's 27 spaces or 28 spaces along the site driveway that are full all the time. And we're going to eliminate all but 5. So 23 of those spaces are going to be eliminated by our project because we have this drop-off. We have vans we use, and because of that, I argue, honestly, on our other 2 projects that I've done, to have a much lower percentage of parking, typically between a half and 1 space per unit. Which is what I think fits. And I think that fits with what you're saying, but I think that's where I am, because if you take the 23 spaces that I've eliminated and you subtract it from the 50 I'm showing, I am showing 27 spaces, which is 0.6 spaces per unit. So it's really just a case of trying to replace those spaces for the VA, which I expect they'll share with us, rather than create new. But that's the goal.
Where are the 23 spaces?
Right along the site driveway, there's an existing 23 spaces along our frontage there on the site driveway, which would be on the left side of your drawing.
Let's see if you look on the color.
Right, there's a bump. Right.
There's a bunch.
There's a row of parking that we're eliminating, and everything I do here, I have to get approved by the VA's engineers, and then at a level in Washington DC. So I'm answering to a lot of bosses on this one. And in that process, they're worried about me taking away their spaces.
So the parking at the top, north-south, at the top,
Yeah,
the new spaces, those are going to be shared between the residences and the VA?
that's right. I'm very comfortable with that. In previous hearings, I've taken pictures of the Pittsfield site at all times of day and night, and the parking lot's half empty. They made me build that to 1 space per unit there. We don't need that, I agree, totally. But to eliminate 23 and then take another 10 away, that makes me a little nervous. We'll be below a half a space per unit.
Will those spaces somehow be marked that they're?
No, I don't think we need to mark them. If you drive up in the campus, I think if there's empty spaces, they'll fill them.
Is there any fencing planned for the site?
There's actually a fence that the VA put in between Bear Hill and the proposed site now, But as far as, no, the answer is no, and we really strongly feel that we don't need any. You know, these folks are gonna own these, this is their home, and we don't wanna make them feel like we're prisoners.
Yeah, there is a. See it, wait.
I guess that goes to the point number 2, I think, on the conditions, is the access, you know, being able for, I mean, there's a bike path, there's the access to the park. Have you guys, was there discussions about creating access or more, or better pedestrian access?
Yes, there, on the plans, we're gonna provide updated plans with better sidewalk connection, crosswalk across their site driveway. We agree totally that we could do better on the internal sidewalks. As far as the path to the future rail trail connection, there's a topographic challenge there. Many of our folks are in scooters or don't walk well, and to suggest that they're going to walk down a serpentine path through the woods and then up and over a railroad siding is difficult for us to contemplate. We just don't think that it's worth the expense to build that, and then we really have concerns about trying to maintain it. You know, our program budgets don't include maintaining a path where the VA maintains the sidewalks. So we put that information in the application. We heard that at our pre-development hearing, but we're hoping to discuss that further.
Just as someone who walks in that area and on that property actually pretty regular, there's already a well-worn path from the VA right at the stoplight up, you know, just a short one up onto the.
Yeah.
So maybe just looking at where people are walking now, I mean, it would be a much smaller, but it might be something that would provide more access.
You know, we're not
to the bike path.
If there's some desire to improve an existing path, and you know, we're willing to do that.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be committed to building a serpentine, handicap accessible path up through the woods. It just seems crazy when I'm starting. I don't want to lose units. I don't want to lose a unit from a cost standpoint.
Well, I'm also thinking because, I mean, there are services besides Look Park, the bike path, there's the aquatic center at JFK.
Right.
There's also the restaurant across the street. There's also a small commercial area where, you know, the residents may be going.
They love convenience stores. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, that's what, but, so, I mean, I haven't walked on Route 9 up there, but I think there is,
There's a path up there that
that's the path.
Yeah, that's the
goes
path.
over to the convenience store.
But is there a sidewalk all along Route 9?
There is not. There's not a sidewalk at all. Well, there's one from here to Oak Park and then down, but there's nothing that way,
Right.
all the way along.
So I was gonna say, you may, I don't know how you're gonna, you know, again, because it's gonna be money if you have to put it inside, but, yeah, I can see in the picture, there is a path.
Right, yeah,
Looks like it's been
Maybe I can
carved
do a-
right from there.
I'm going to be there tomorrow, honestly, at 11 a.m. for a meeting with DHCD, and I'll walk those paths.
Yeah, because it goes right to,
Existing paths.
It's a straight
That's
shot.
not how I was thinking, to be honest with you, improving existing paths. I was thinking about a new one. That makes a lot of
Yeah,
practical sense.
those are just, I know two, you know, driving by there regularly, there's the two connections that are used pretty heavily by everybody at the VA
I know just where
property.
you mean where the crosswalk is. We'll look at that. That's a fair comment. Thank you.
Anybody else?
yeah, I mean, this is just a question, I mean, of all the area on the site, how did you decide on that particular one? Because there's the triangle-shaped area, there's the area off to the left. Is there something,
Special about that particular
Yeah.
spot? Well, we applied for a grant, a national grant, and then we were awarded it. That's the site they gave us.
oh, they chose that site for you? Oh, okay. Because it just looks like it could have been closer to the facilities or closer, you know, there are other places you could have put it that might have made the site
Yeah,
actually
that
work
was
better.
That's the site I was given.
Actually, that just reminded me, I think, the park and ride lot is gonna be in that vicinity, actually.
It's just,
Where those affinity paths are, right?
just down the hill, which if you're heading down the hill would be to your right.
I'm sorry, what's that, Carolyn?
The new park and ride for that we're coordinating with, well, PBTA, we have, the VA, and Smith College is paying for.
And where's it gonna be at?
It's gonna be, in this, I thought it was higher up in this open field here.
Oh, it's gonna be on that side.
But I think, but you're saying you think it's lower. I can pull up, I was just trying to see if I could pull up the plans.
Yeah, I've only been told. I have not seen the plan, so I,
Well, Wayne has the plan, so it might work, it might be good, you know, when you think about the, connecting with on those existing pathways. Maybe, we should sit down and look at the,
I'd appreciate that,
park and ride plans, because it might make sense to go through there, or, you know, because they might be
Associated with
utilizing that as
facilities
well
up
in terms of,
Sure.
you know, if the bus is gonna come in and all of that.
that's right. Okay.
Does the PBTA currently
Steve
pull
was
up
asking
into the VA right now?
It's right
Yeah.
up the main site
They
drive.
do, so they do have a turnaround.
Yeah, it goes up to
Me,
the
they're
top,
working on-
to
there's a
the
lot of
flagpole.
Stuff on top of the building now.
So would a resident of this project have to walk up the hill?
We actually will bring them over there in a van.
Oh,
Oh, I guess it's kind of far.
Our vans are constantly circulating, so it's not unusual for folks to hitch a ride just across campus.
and the vans these are vans that just stay on the campus, that just,
No, not necessarily.
oh, they leave as well?
Appointments.
So this isn't a formal hearing, but do we take comments from public, open it up?
No, because of a formal public hearing, and we've.
The zoning.
Yeah, and so I don't want
So
to
that'll be
confuse
their
anybody
venue
with,
for it.
yeah.
Okay. So other than the comments from staff, does anything else jump out? Which you've seen all the
I
comments
have
from
them.
staff, okay.
I appreciate that, by the way, thank you.
As far,
Two.
as far as the lighting plan goes, it's not possible for us to waive the zoning requirements, are we, for the light?
Well, under the lighting ordinance, the planning board does have the jurisdiction to grant through site plan approval a different lighting standard than what's in the zoning. So, and the zoning board can waive any regulation in the zoning, whether it specifies that they can do that or not, because that's generally the body that's created to do this kind of thing.
But-
So you can make a recommendation that, you know, one way or the other about the lighting, saying you understand the population that this project is serving, and that maybe some increase in light levels may be appropriate if that's what you think, but leave ultimately the lighting number to be approved by the zoning board,
Okay.
the actual maximum illumination levels.
But they have to meet the lighting requirements unless they're granted
A waiver,
a
that's
waiver.
right.
Okay.
And the zoning board can grant the waiver.
Yes.
Right, I think, you know, the applicant says that they've gone from the 4.5, hopefully down to 1.2,
1.2, right.
and they're still working on it, and my hope is, yeah, they'll continue to work on it, but that's, you know, they're going in the right direction, because the way it's a very exposed spot as you're driving across Route 9, you know, you know, and for the area, the characteristics of the area, it's a pretty rural area.
It seems to me we should go through the suggested recommendations from staff one by one and see whether or not we, I mean, for instance, number 6, whether or not we should ask for reduction in parking spaces.
All right, let's go through these one by one, quickly then, just see. It's number 1, require revised lighting plan that meets the zoning standards. We talked about that, and so they're headed in the right direction, but keep trying, and if you can't get there, just explain why, and if that might be, we leave it up to zoning board to grant the waiver.
Yeah.
Number 2, direct lighting on sidewalks and eliminate extra pole lights that light the driveway. Talked about that.
Yep.
3, require detail for lamp fixtures that meet the zoning ordinance, so,
I think that means downcast, dark sky.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
fully cut off.
yeah, because there's no detail, so we just need that.
Question of that.
4, require path connections south to the city's rail trail sidewalk on North Main. So we talked about that, and if that's not going to happen, or a good faith effort could be made to improve the footpath traffic, or explain why, because of the population and so forth. 5, require full sidewalk connection with crosswalks and handicap ramps from buildings to VA driveway sidewalks. You're already working on a revised sidewalk
We're
plan.
going to propose that, yep.
And for Andy, this is yours, eliminate 10-plus parking spaces unless it can be shown that there's demand for parking spaces. This goes toward the 23 spots that you're losing because of the, so that's explainable.
So we're not gonna recommend that.
The logic is sound, to me, as to why the numbers are skewed a little bit. Because, so you have shared parking between the project and the VA, and when you eliminate when you exclude what they're losing, it's, what do you say, 0.6 per unit?
It's 0.6 at the 44. If you add in both, it's 0.7.
Which is less than the 1 per unit that.
Okay.
And 7, approve waivers for open space, construction materials, frontage, and signs.
Yeah, what was the construction materials issue?
Curbing, I think I had some curbing.
Right.
Granite?
I think, let me see, I have it right here. So the request was for, bituminous concrete, versus granite curbing was the big one. I mean, in our the reason why you all know, the reason why we require granite is, because it holds up forever. I mean, the one argument why this might make sense and why I could see the zoning board agreeing to that would be that it's on the VA property, VA is going and the nonprofit is going to be responsible for this. There's not going to be a lot of public city company involved in maintaining the road, so it's sort of their headache if it falls
The
apart.
roads out there don't have granite now.
No. If there's any granite up there at all, yeah.
And the frontage and signs issue?
Yeah, the front, I mean, yeah, I don't really think that's, because they have two components of the project, then, you know, I don't think that, you know, I think they want to be clear to people who are coming to visit, so I don't think that's really big. Plus, it's off the road anyway, it's on the driveway, right?
It's right at the entrances, and we actually, our signs are a pre-rusted metal sign. They're very low-key. You know, they're not lit. I mean, they're...
So it's not as though it's going to be competing with the new LED.
Yeah, right.
Can we talk about
Everything will pale in comparison.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a
Yeah, can we make that a condition?
Can we make that a condition?
It's the feds, it's not.
I just showed up one day, I think they
No.
just dropped it off a truck and plugged it in. It's just like,
Well, there's two of them. There's another one. There's two.
yeah, oh, it's just,
There's one up here, and then there's one down too.
That's a sign.
And then in terms of the frontage, it's really just because they're not really creating a lot, and it's really site frontage. And given that I mean, I don't think it's an issue from a land use perspective, because they're clustering it right next to this hospital. They're not really actually acquiring any property per se, it's just a lease, so staff certainly doesn't have any reason to recommend that not be waived.
So we're going to vote on a recommendation. Does somebody want to make aforementioned recommendation?
I move that we recommend to the ZBA the approval of the comprehensive permit at the VA for Soldier On with the suggested recommendations that we've discussed. That's done.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Second.
That one framed
it's a
it.
tie.
All in favor? Well, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Like this?
40R, no, 40B is not the one that
You didn't get one?
the state gives the city back money, that's
No.
40R.
It's 40R, right? Yeah. It's hard to keep track of all the letters.
Yeah, because
Major change.
These are gonna be found to be traffic.
Yeah, for the problem.
Hey, what?
Huge, it's just
Yeah.
for the center.
Yeah. Actually, I gotta make sure that, I need to put that as a, because we've all talked about it, but I want to
Zoning?
make sure that it's,
Right.
so I should make a note.
Those are URA people that don't want,
what's up with the,
they have to rub shoulders with it.
Holly and Bridge, where they just got done.
Yeah, they're renovating.
Oh, yeah.
They have a sign that says condos for sale.
Oh,
Oh, really?
guess it's not gonna house them.
Yeah, I guess not.
That's what I was wondering. Do you know about, do you know about the antique store on the corner of Holly and Bridge, the second, third floor, a couple years ago?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And they're renovating them?
Yeah.
But they,
apartments.
but I think there's a sign that says condos for sale.
Oh, really?
You can have this too.
Oh, well, they may have, did I know that? They were gonna go condo?
That's what I was wondering.
I thought they were gonna be market rate rentals, but I didn't realize that, so maybe they changed their,
Yeah, there's the antique store right next to it, it's the reproduction antique store, the little one.
Right.
There was a sign in that one, Joe.
well, I know, oh, it might be the, retail space only. Because they're gonna carve up I knew they were gonna carve up the first floor into separate units. So that it's not just sort of a merged kind of wall, where you just walk through one wall and go to another one. They're actually creating, so it might just be that the
Oh, but-
commercial or condo users, I'm not sure. I didn't remember the
It
commercials.
looks like the upper work is pretty far along. The windows are in.
What are they talking
Fence
about?
business.
The antique store on the corner of Holly and Bridge Street that's under renovation.
Oh, okay.
Hospital has
First
begun to
graphic.
communicate with
Looks like they're selling them.
You have to go shopping.
Looks like a what?
They're selling them as individual.
Oh, really?
Honey, I'm in a
Ought to be
meeting.
fancy, huh?
Text her.
Told you not to call me when I'm in a meeting.
Well, it's close to the post office.
Oh, they're after me.
Okay, next up is
It's a little bit longer than 8.
zoning map change.
That's okay, I listened.
Do you want to do that, or is there a couple little ones we can do?
There is one potential little one. For Hampshire Heights and Hathaway. That's the only other little one. And I guess we can look at that one first. And want to walk us through that?
Yeah.
This is on the,
It's the very last page of the staff recommendation.
So, yeah, we were just sort of looking, I don't know if you remember, I think it was last year, it might have been longer ago, that we went through and we rezoned, when we did the industrial zone changes, bless you, we rezoned River Run out of industrial to residential. So this is sort of comparable to that, looking at whether or not these big blocks of apartment units make sense to be in a zoning district that's never gonna be, they'll never comply with the zoning. And it's because the density is much greater than what would be allowed. So just looking at maybe, does it make sense to have this as another sort of large pocket of urban residential C? And so that would be the Hampshire Heights project and Hathaway Farms.
Where's Hathaway for? Is that
It's right next to it, so on that
Oh, there's the
screen,
two.
yeah, so it's off of Barrett Street, but you see it, it's the one right next to Hampshire Heights. And, maybe there are others like this, we were trying to think, and then exploring Mark and I kind of brains a little bit about if there are other like or similar sites as this that aren't currently urban residential C that makes sense to rezone. Right, it only matters sort of on the books and saying, is this, as a policy statement, if we're saying it should be a lower density than it really is. But whereas if we had it the highest density, then we're acknowledging and saying that, yes, we're not gonna try to encourage it to change to be lower density in the future.
what about like then Coach Light, that's right across from Hampton?
That's already urban residential.
That's already, it's.
Yeah. And then the rest of it is, I think, URA on that side of Barrett Street. But then you get to URB on the Jackson Street School side, and then there's a little sprinkling of URA in
Will
there
it be
too.
an island of URC? 'Cause that's one of the.
Well, the Coach Light is like right across the street, so it, I just freaked out. It is connected, would be connected with a stem, but because it backs up to the commercial district, and we talked about urban residency sort of surrounding the commercial areas, it wouldn't be considered, spot zoning. It's a big section, it's not just one, one house, one lot.
Right.
thing.
Right.
And the implication would only be if that site was ever developed. That's the only.
Well, I mean, the other thing is, we get, or, what happens more frequently is that appraisers might come in, or people might come in and say, is this a non-conforming use or a non-conforming? And so we would have to say, yes, it's non-conforming because we don't allow multifamily over residential B, and the density is much higher than we allow. So that's where it would come up more regularly than, aside from if someone were to come in and propose a total wholesale redevelopment. I mean, the Housing Authority has actually asked about adding units, and we've, at this place, not recently, but in the past. And we've always said that, sure, you could do more units, but it's going to be a comprehensive permit because you don't meet zoning, which would probably be okay from the Housing Authority's perspective, because of course that's what they provide is affordable housing. But again, it goes back to that policy statement. Are we saying that we want to, clearly indicate that this is non-conforming and we're trying to push it in that sort of lower density, or are we saying, well, urban residential C makes sense, if there's ability to add units, then sure, why don't we add units?
Right. We were thinking this morning, Florence Heights would be another maybe similar situation, but that has watershed protection,
Water supply protection?
water supply protection.
Is that, because that's in URB right now, isn't it?
Well, it's in water supply protection. It was originally, it's been in it was an urban residential A with a water supply protection overlay up until 2 years ago when we changed the water supply to be a zone of its own right. But that zoning also says whatever your lot size was at the time that you built, that's what you get to continue to. So in essence, it takes care of that sort of non-conforming status. And we also don't want to necessarily say that in a water supply protection, we want really high density.
Right. This one makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to think of any reason why we wouldn't, but I can't,
Seems to make sense.
can't think of anything. So this is what, would we make this recommendation that goes to city council? Is that what we're doing? Or we make it, or is that?
Well, that would be part of the whole package. When we start submitting these zoning changes, we would go ahead and put in the map changes.
So this is part of the other, not
Yeah.
a separate one.
Right. I mean, it would be a separate, sort of a map change, but we'll just put it in the pile.
So we're all good with that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's almost 8:30. And we've got the map changes. Do you want to, is this a summation of
Yeah, so we can have.
where we are so far?
Yeah, so what is in front of you, Jen, do you need a copy of?
You sent it by email, right?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because I have an extra paper.
Oh, if you have an extra one, that would be easier
Uh-huh.
for me to look at.
Yeah. There's J, and, I just have one extra, oh no, there it is, there's A. So what you have in front of you is basically, what had gone before to, public forum, but with some, changes, some modifications. And I added in the discussion and the agreement that you all had about the PV, which is on the last page, if you, just taking at the top, urban residential A, to take out the kilowatt reference. But then the other big piece is for all three of them, making some modifications to the building design column. Actually, I'm not sure that it's necessarily applicable in urban residential A, so I might take that out. Although I could see where there may be, if someone wants to create more than 5 parking spaces, that might be appropriate. So, but at any rate, the changes in the design column are really about addressing concerns about larger projects and how they would fit into the character of the neighborhood. And one of the biggest issues that we heard, sort of going back to the Ward 3 meeting, was what if someone added 10 units to a parcel and then they put this big parking field a la the Hockenham Road Townhouse project, where there are 14 condominium units, and all the parking is laid out in front of the units, which is completely different than the way it's laid out in the rest of the neighborhood. So put some more language about parking specifically, and how the parking is part of the site design, it's not just building. So the added language is, parking for more than 5 cars shall be distributed on the site to minimize the impact on the neighborhood character. And this can be accomplished by small groupings of spaces surrounded by landscaping, or creating sort of an alleyway with parallel parking, so it almost looks like an urban street that you would have. So in any case, there is a provision that when you're creating more than 6 parking spaces, that automatically triggers site plan in this change. So you would be reviewing this for site plan, but it's just more specific language about what you would want to see when someone comes forward. And it might give comfort to the neighborhood to feel like that issue is going to be addressed.
And you think that language would avoid another project like that?
Yeah. And then I think, we talked last time about the building design and whether or not we should go into more details about that, and I don't think there was, any kind of consensus on doing that. But what we've done in the interim is we're going to sit down with, we might have a little bit of money to ask a designer to put together some line drawing sketches to be included into this as a part of the zoning, to show what features of structures are important to neighborhood character. So if there are roof overhangs and, sill details or things like that, so that it focuses people more when they're thinking about design, and they're not just looking at this saying, well, I can argue how this fits into the neighborhood character, but really sort of give clues as to what this text means. Mm-hmm. So we're going to sit down with some people tomorrow to talk about that and see if they're willing to do that for us. And then have that incorporated into the zoning as part of the packet. So it's more of a, a graphic representation of what we're talking about.
And that came out of the Ward 3 meeting as well?
Well, no. I mean, the thing that came out of Ward 3 was their concern of bigger projects and what they would look like and how they couldn't possibly fit into the neighborhood. And the issue was particularly because the Hockenham Road project is in their neighborhood, in Ward 3, I should say. Ward 3 sort of extends to a lot of neighborhoods, but they had that front and center as an example of where a project might not fit in. They did also raise a concern, I think we discussed last time, about, or an interest in thinking about restricting the number of units. I believe we talked about that. So I think the idea, and so maybe putting a special permit process on, if you exceed so many units, but already there's a site plan trigger for, more than 2,000 square feet of construction. And so I think from our staff perspective, special permit would really, you'd have to have very specific guidelines about why you turn a project down. And it wouldn't just be because it's 8 units instead of 6 units. And so I don't know that, the number of units is necessarily the issue. It's really how it's laid out on the site and whether it does fit into the neighborhood. So I think that my argument would be that the language here in your approval would be such that you could say, the way you've designed this doesn't work, but if you come back with a different design that has the same number of units, it might work, as opposed to, arbitrarily setting a cap on the number of units that gets in or that doesn't get in.
You can't have that argument in a site plan, though, can you?
Well, if you have language that says this project can't be approved unless you're showing that it fits into the neighborhood character in terms of your building design. And so you're not saying no to the project per se, you're saying you've got to redesign and come back.
It just seems that argument, it doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood. You have to redesign and come back is more of a special permit argument than a site plan argument. Versus, site plan is just technical setbacks, dimensional, distances and so forth. You either meet it or you don't. It's black or white. What we're talking about is.
Well, I know, I mean, I guess that's the issue when you get into setting design, minimum sort of level of design standards, which we've never had for residential units.
Right.
So that's sort of where we're,
Right, I think that's
we
where-
are sort of blending, but we're adding a new component that you've never had to deal with.
Yeah, you would need some criteria, because otherwise, it's blue. I don't like blue,
Right.
Didn't we have this come up though, like right after the plan came out, sustainability, there was a project in Florence that was really not compatible with the neighborhood. Do you remember what I'm talking about? No, Lenny, huh? Do you remember that? This was before your time, I think. I mean, because I'm just thinking of that as an example of when we really were
Do you
able.
remember where it was?
I don't, and it wasn't
Is it
that.
like Straw Avenue? Is that what you're thinking of?
maybe. It wasn't that big
Yeah.
of a project, but it
Yeah.
just was not.
And that was it. So under special permit, you do have that, and I think, that's probably what you're referring to, is that the character of the neighborhood does come up. So because it was special permit, you could say no, because you're not. But I think the idea behind this is to say that we're trying to encourage new units in these places where we think it makes sense from a sustainability perspective, but you need to make sure that your design fits into the neighborhood. You can't just come in and plunk down a cinder block box and call it a day.
I mean, I think that's exactly what we did there. Like, it just did not fit into the neighborhood at all, and that gave us the teeth that we needed. I was-
Right, and in site plan, it's not there now, so this design piece is what I think sort of,
Right.
it does sort of step into what had normally sort of been a special permit review.
So in theory, if jump ahead 5 years and this is all gospel, could a house like the one on Ward Ave or Woodlawn Avenue, those modern houses that popped up, wouldn't meet?
Well, potentially, but it also says these could be waived by planning board approval. So I don't know, I mean, let's say, I haven't looked at either of those. I think that's why we need graphic representation, because you could have overhangs that don't look like an 1800s Victorian. Or you could have, porches facing the street, or a different kind of porch that faces the street that doesn't look like, a bungalow or something.
To me, having diagrams or guidelines, as far as the end, for usability of the chart would be nice, to have a graphic representation of what it is we're trying to say in the chart. But at the same time, to limit those to just simple line drawing and have those encompass, everything we're talking about, it would seem like they'd be so broad that they don't have any teeth, or they're gonna get too specific and have too much teeth, too much bite. And I wouldn't know how, I'd be curious to see how Kuhn Riddle would look at that and tackle that.
Well, and I feel like particularly some neighborhoods, my neighborhood is a house of big old Victorians, and the only way that those are making any sense right now is by dividing them up. So if you're going to, what could you put in design drawings except another Victorian-esque sort of character? And so the Ward Avenue house would never get built.
Right.
And I think as we hit more extreme energy demands, the houses that show up at solar decathlon demonstrations are going to be more sought after. Now, I'm not suggesting tear down Victorians and put in, little green houses, but I do think it's really problematic to think what drawing would be helpful.
That's what I mean.
Well, I think when we did King Street, we had a similar discussion. There are now design guidelines on King Street, but they're pretty general. Like, the door has to face the street. There are houses in town where they build sideways, and so you get this weird looking street where there's a sideways house with a porch facing the neighbor's kitchen, as opposed to being oriented street. Or
garages, but I mean, I can't remember where we have this, but the garage can't be more than a certain percentage of the frontage of the, I mean, otherwise, you drive down and you see, oh, I live on a street of garages. Porches in the front or other, like windows have to be a certain percentage. I think there can be guidelines that are relatively broad. I don't want us to become Marblehead, where the color of your house is determined by the city.
4 colors to choose from.
Right, and that's it. The shutters have to be black, and you have to have shutters. And I don't think that would fit the character of Northampton.
No, I don't know how to, I wouldn't know how to have graphic representation specifically to assist the end user.
Well, they could also be
without
things
being
like
so specific,
like for example, so you have a streetscape, and there happens to be an empty lot that could be built on, and all the houses along the street are all 20 feet back. You don't want this house to be 10 feet back or 30 feet back. You don't want it to be out of character and that has nothing to do with what the building looks like, but that's also the positioning of the building on the street as much as, anything else. So,
to me, that's a site plan issue, and I'm having a hard time getting past the site plan versus special permit. Where it sets back, that's a site plan. What it looks like, what the roof overhang is, and this Ward Avenue house that we keep bringing up.
but a site plan will say something like, the zoning will say it has to have a 20-foot setback. But if every other house on the street is 30 feet, they're all meeting the zoning. But you don't want to stick a house 20 feet back, even though it's allowed by the zoning, because it doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood. So you can meet all the zonings and still be out of character.
But I think you're talking really more about orientation to the rest of the street and the rest of the houses, right? I mean, that's the thing that sticks out about the Hockham one. It's not the design of the building so much as it's the layout and the orientation relative to the rest of the neighborhood. So maybe it really isn't design so much as orientation.
Yeah, I guess, where do you,
I don't know.
It's that line.
it becomes a gray area.
Well, the way the language is written now is, for new buildings, setback scale and massing, which is what you're referring to, I think, needs to meet the block face, essentially. So that's what we have. So if you think that's enough, then, and then added with the parking, detail, I still think that would be important to specify that. Is that what I'm hearing? Makes more sense to keep it that way?
I think in listening to Steve, I can understand the guidance in the form of rules easier than I can in the form of images. Because you have to capture a style of house when you do that.
Well, I think when we looked at King Street and we had the side view of, the road, sidewalk, planting bed, crosswalk, and everything pictorially was, okay, this is what, now I read the text, I look at the diagram, that's great, I follow that. But I'm having a hard time taking that and putting it toward the design of a house, because it's not straightforward. Every house.
Well, it's one of those, you know it when you see it type. Yeah.
Right.
You'll know if it fits or if it doesn't.
Right.
And even if it's, I think about the Woodlawn house.
Right.
Now, it clearly does not look, but to me, it fits.
Well, see, that's the,
To me, even though it doesn't look anything like a house, in the place it's in, it fit, I don't see it as disruptive to the neighborhood. But it clearly is.
A lot of people would argue that.
I'm sure they would.
A lot of people would be in favor of the house. But I don't know if that's our, dictate, and so if we end up diagrammatically what the house is going to look like because the house next door looks a certain way.
Right, it could end up.
That house would never have.
Right. It could end up hamstringing us instead of, giving us the ability.
Could end up with a Marblehead, which is what I would.
Which is what you don't want.
And there are streets that, where I've lived on in town where it goes Craftsman, bungalow, beautiful Victorian, tiny little ranch.
And it's just as
rectory of
eclectic
an
as
old
it
church,
and it's fine.
and there is no consistency, and they're all great houses. Right. There is no consistency to any of them that you could say, this is the characteristic of the neighborhood.
Unless you look at them in total and see, kind of like this is the scale, this is whatever style. It's more about the technical part.
Is it possible for one of us to make a comment regarding that, just as an interested person?
It's up to you guys, I mean.
Yeah, what you're talking about is right in my field, and it's obvious from a lot of research that's been done that what one person is seeing as beautiful and balanced and so forth, another person isn't. We all are endowed with different senses. Our eyes don't all see the same thing. People have different numbers of combs in their eye, for example, so some people see color differently than others. Some people see geometric organization differently than others. So you're all talking about something which you all may have in your minds, but it's because of the way you perceive the thing. So one neighborhood may look wonderful to one of you, and to another one, and that's just normal kind of thing. So I'm not sure you can ever resolve that unless you have all of you have the same basic characteristics. If you don't, it just seemed like you were talking, and it doesn't go anywhere. It won't go anywhere. And I think it could be demonstrated that if you had a number of sample streets that you could all look at, you were asked to arrange the houses, it would all be different arrangements. It's just, I'm not sure how you resolve that.
Yeah,
I'd be curious though to see if, I mean, initially we thought it was worth a shot because it came up at some of the meetings and there was a desire there because of things like the Hopkins Road and so forth. And so I'd be curious to see if Coon Riddle could come up with kind of some generic guidelines, not generic, but I guess specific guidelines that don't cross that boundary too far.
So they're more about form than.
Right.
I just think you have a grant or you have some way of.
No, we're just thinking about it. We're trying to just talk to people and say, you know, does this make sense? Can we do this? We have a little bit of money. Yeah, we have a priority development fund grant that's very small. We're going to use it towards some other downtown projects type things, but we might be able to also sort of restructure it and use it to look at, you know, infill housing essentially.
Yeah.
This can't be a unique problem. So my theory always is, hasn't somebody else tried to deal with this? And if so, what do we know about what it is they tried to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue, yes, that's true. And I think a lot of, the issue is, you know, a lot of places do it, but they do the study first and they do it on a neighborhood base because you have a neighborhood that you're trying to protect or preserve or create.
Specific.
Right. And so it becomes a much different discussion when, you know, I think someone else said it, that there's not really probably one neighborhood that has the same type of architectural style or size or, you know, massing in Northampton. And, you know, in fact, the Zoning Revisions Committee talked about it and said, you know, they thought, well, we got to have specific design review, but the reality is, you know, mostly you'd have it for historic districts or downtown. You're trying to, you know, so you have something that you're basing it on. So I think that's the trick. And so they do, other places typically do neighborhood studies, and then based on the neighborhood study, they create the guidance.
Well, that's right, because the only places we have these right now in town are downtown, Elm Street, and King Street.
Right.
You know, of all the.
So that may be the issue, and so
the
therefore
historic
when you come to some place where you're beginning to, if there should be such a thing, then that would be the time to attempt to deal with what those characteristics are that you specifically really are trying to preserve.
But I think the reason that we're even having this discussion and what motivated this, I think, is when Carolyn went to the URC or Ward 3 neighborhood meeting, is that because it's an offshoot of, we're gonna, well, what this proposal is to reduce the lot size.
Yep.
So to take what are currently lots that cannot be built on and make them buildable.
Right.
And so that's gonna change, and what people are concerned with is, what will that change do to their neighborhood?
Right, developers are gonna come in and put something up, and it's not gonna look like what
Right.
else is in my
Whatever's
neighborhood.
there, and that's, but on the other hand, there are plenty of lots you can build on today that you could put up anything you want. I mean, you just have to find a lot, and there's plenty of lots for sale today, you can go put anything you want on them. So, this is motivated because of this downside, you know, this particular.
To that end, remind me, I mean, just put it in context maybe for everyone in the room. Why aren't we doing this? We're trying to get all of our zoning all in one place. We're trying to make it all consistent so that it wasn't spread through statutes that were all everywhere. And so, it's hard to mush it all together, but I mean, that's what we've been grappling with. So it didn't just to solve the empty lot, I mean, that's one outcome of it.
No, you're right. The motivation for this was when the ZRC was looking at existing neighborhoods, and it was clear that the zoning
Didn't
did not
match.
reflect what was
Right.
there. And the zoning was so out of whack with what was built and the neighborhoods that we live in, that it just didn't fit.
Which actually does lead to the situation of when you get ready to build a house, one falls down, you replace it, it doesn't match because it's not, the neighborhood, the zoning,
Right,
the
right.
neighborhood wasn't right for
Right,
it.
right, to meet the current zoning,
Right.
you have to build something that
That's
doesn't
wrong.
fit the neighborhood.
That's
Right,
right.
right, right.
Right.
That
right.
was
The
what-
current
that
zoning,
was
yeah,
at the
would force
heart
you
of that.
to knock down 2 houses to build 1.
Right.
And it's just, it's
Yeah.
so that
Makes
was,
sense.
so the reason we're having the design discussion is because when people saw that there's the possibility that we're gonna open up lots that currently built on now, the concern is, well, what's gonna happen to my neighborhood? So,
Which is a valid concern, and so I think
I'm not downplaying the concern, but it's just, I think Devon's point is a good one, is that the reason we're doing this is not so we can build more houses, or not so we can change neighborhoods. We're changing the zoning to fit the neighborhood.
Right.
That's the goal.
Right. Which should protect the nature of the neighborhood.
Right, or allow you to build in character with the neighborhood.
Right.
So if there's small lots in your neighborhood, you can build it on a small lot and it'll look just like any other house in the neighborhood.
That's, I've been saying that in a general sense, the zoning changes that have been proposed are a reflection of what exists in Northampton.
Right, we should, yeah.
Not a reduction or a change to what exists.
Maybe we shouldn't call them zoning changes, maybe we should call them zoning conformance.
Yeah.
Trying to make the zoning match as opposed to making the houses match the zoning.
Is any public comment on that possible?
Not just yet, I don't think, this isn't a formal public hearing, so.
I understand that.
So, do you want to walk through A, B, and C, or do you want to?
Well, I mean, they really, so they're
carries
pretty
through,
much
it's
the same. We haven't made any other changes to the lot, so the only change is from where we left off before was, excuse me, the design, the parking lot piece. And then I found some things that were left out, had to add the language about what the definition of a tag style is. And so other than that, it's really basically the same.
The parts that are in yellow, oh, sorry, Mark.
Yeah, remind me what the color coding means?
Yeah, which is sort of, well, originally, the color coding was to sort of highlight a significant change in the text from what the existing language was. So on the first page of, I'll take URA because it's in my hand if it's right, and it also applies to URB, but detached accessory apartments, and then home business for personal services. This personal service business is a change in that it would allow hairdressers or dog grooming by special permit. So it was an issue that came up during that whole home business thing, but we didn't change it at that time. So it's a tweak of the language that exists. And then, the assisted, so mostly it's highlighting of what, of sort of more of the significant change as opposed to the reorganization of the chart itself. And for, that we had just, that I wanted to highlight in our discussions going back early on. So the other example is a detached accessory structure allowing, up to 3% of lot area or 1,000 square feet. So we talked about that as well. So I can go through and eliminate all those. I think they're probably all confusing, but when it does get submitted to council, I'd probably just eliminate it and submit it as, the text change and say, this is the new. And, we might need to walk line by line and explain, and I might need to explain, this is the same as today, but, and then,
I think
versus.
you'll have to explain it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then, but I do, I think I'll leave this as a format for everyone to look at, but just go ahead and submit a clean version as part of the ordinance.
So, In theory, in the change to the PV that came up tonight, the 8 kilowatts.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and-
Change that.
Yeah.
But in theory, these are almost ready, if not ready, to move forward,
Right.
pending the potential of us, of adding to these line drawings or something to assist in the use of the trucks.
Right, and so what I would do is come back, if we do decide to move forward on that, and we do get something, I'd bring it back to you guys first to decide whether you want that at all.
How long do you think that would take?
I don't know, that's one thing we have to find out in this process. I mean, I think, it would be great to be able to introduce something in December to city council, so it gets referred out for the beginning of the year for official public hearing and discussion, if it makes sense to do that. So I do want to sort of keep it moving, if you all think that's the right way to go.
I'd like to keep it moving, but I'd be curious to see what came out of that exercise. Maybe get into it with the line drawings and you say, you know what, we can't find that line, or it's just not gonna work, but it was worth pursuing, doesn't work, move on.
Yeah.
Or maybe you do come back and say, you know what, we've come up with something we think works, and then we discuss it then, and then, because I'd like to.
Yeah, I think we only have one meeting between now and the end of the year anyway,
Right, December.
Yeah, nothing in 2 weeks, one,
for Thanksgiving.
that's right, one.
One in
early
December.
December, then that's it.
That's it.
So it'd be nice, I don't know if that's enough time between now and then to determine whether or not
Right.
the line drawing issue can happen or not. But I think it's worth pursuing. We had some momentum, and then we haven't stalled out, but I'd like to regain some momentum.
Yeah, that is kind of part of the problem, though. It would be interesting to see if somebody could come up with something that felt satisfactory.
Yeah. I can't envision what it would be, but I'd be curious to have somebody give it a shot.
Yeah.
I don't know how everybody else feels about it. Do you think it's necessary to have that into it? I mean, we've streamlined these to the extent possible, I think. Made it as clean as we can. Would it make it cleaner? Would it help if like on King Street, we had diagrams that went with it?
Can you foresee that you're ever going to point to these diagrams and say, you don't look like this and therefore you can't? I mean, is that?
I would think it would be more for the applicant when they're envisioning a certain project or a house or something, to look at those guidelines, look at the diagrams, and fit their project to that. So we may never see it because it's already been addressed on their end. Or if it does come in front of us and it looks totally different, then we'd have a vehicle with which to discuss that or make recommendations. Because if it's just technical, if it's just site plan, to me, the argument is still more of a special permit argument than a site plan argument.
But do you think could it have the opposite effect? I mean, could it be too prescriptive in a sense that, that when, instead of having a description, you've got an actual picture?
That's on a Marblehead.
Right. Is that the slippery slope, where all of a sudden we start seeing everything that looks like the picture? I mean,
right,
I don't know. I'm just worried that it's going to go that direction.
Doesn't that depend upon how it is you label what those things are? Whether you label them in a way that implies that they have to actually look like that, or whether they're simply there as suggestions for appropriate designs for the neighborhood. Now, I don't know how many of these you're going to do, because you've got a million different neighborhoods. I mean, I don't know what you have in mind, but I can't imagine that you're really going to be saying for most of the neighborhoods around here, it's got to look like this. Rather, here are some visions of this neighborhood. Now, whether that's really worth it or not is the question.
If it's a diagrammatic representation of the text on the chart, then that would be fine, as far as massing, setbacks, and so forth. But if it moves forward into actual, architectural elements and so forth, then we get into the risk.
Well, I guess, if I can understand the desire to have it, I agree that it may be, an impossible task. maybe Q-Riddle has some insight, maybe, I mean, I'm willing to see if somebody has any insights into it and see if they could help us, but, I think what we're also talking about, when we looked at the map, there are 10 parcels in 10 parcels in URC.
Yeah, in terms of new parcels, it's less
12
than
in URC.
5%.
Yeah, it's like 1%, 4.5%.
I mean, the numbers we're looking at are so small in terms of the possible lots that could be developed in
And
this.
I think that's where it sounds,
Yeah.
it sounds alarming to say we're redoing the zoning, but we're not rebuilding hardly anything because
Right.
of the way the neighborhoods are structured. And that's where I think the idea that what we're trying to do here reflects what the neighborhoods really are, so that when somebody comes to do something, they're gonna fit into the neighborhood. I mean, it's a very straightforward sort of logic.
So do we even need to do that?
Well, if you talk to Q-Riddle, I mean, I'd be curious to see what you find out before our next meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, give her a shot.
Yeah, there's no reason not to.
There's no reason not to, but
I mean, because in theory, if what we have is what we would move forward anyway, then if in the December meeting, we can have additional information to add to it, and we all like it, then great, we supplement this. If not, we say, just keep going. That's it. Brief, sure.
Residences could be created and where their locations are. The last time I had an exchange with OPD on this, that hadn't been determined yet.
Well, we haven't determined definitively down to a precise number. We determined what the magnitude of the change would be, yes, by looking at the lots. But it doesn't take into, it doesn't include several caveats. One, you know, would people want to carve off lots from their large lots and sell off a parcel and divide it for new housing? The other would be, we don't have, we didn't counter in wetlands or steep slopes or any other sort of resource constraints. So we've put down on by district what sort of the magnitude would probably be, but the point of it wasn't to say how many of these could happen in each neighborhood, but generally, you know, we're talking about, depending on what zone it is, anywhere from less than 1% of new building lots up to, you know, 5%, or just under 5%.
Was that done by zone or
By zone.
location, or was it
By
just
zone.
by the whole zone at once, or specific streets?
Well, we had to do it by lots because we had to look at each lot size and see if the lot was big enough to theoretically carve off a piece. So, you know, that was making an assumption that someone who owned a big lot would want to create a new division line and sell off to have a.
So, comments or this?
Well, I need to ask the question before I can make the comment, to have a clarification. Is the 5% applicable to the whole zone, or is that the maximum on a given street?
It was done as a zone.
As a zone. Okay, here's my concern. I live in a very mixed neighborhood, Round Hill. There are all kinds of buildings there. Some of them are pretty horrible. When I hear you talking about trying to control the type of building that goes in, I think if you can do that in some way, in any way, that could be important. 32 Round Hill Road, take a look at it sometime. There's a lovely neo-Victorian, looks like an English country house, and somebody put onto the back of it a brick box. It's a box, a brick box. It doesn't fit at all. That's an extreme case. Those kind of things could happen. The other thing I'm concerned about is that, as I understand what Ms. Mish was just telling us, you could get a concentration of buildup in a given neighborhood. A developer could come in and say, there are a lot of lots here, I can do something with this, I can make a profit on it, and make offers to people that would be very attractive to them. They could then go in and convert single-family units to double, triple, quadruple, depending on the lot size. That would change the character of the neighborhood. It may be a mixed neighborhood, but it's going to move in the direction of greater density and a different type of neighborhood if these rules are applied too rigidly. I like the discretionary approach to this because that says, all right, if there's a good reason for doing this, we'll let you do it. What we're doing is moving toward a rigid set of rules that would permit people to do things that could have a negative impact on attractive neighborhoods. Last night I had our doctor over to our house who came from New York and is renting a house on Round Hill and says he's thinking of buying the house because this is the most attractive neighborhood in town. There are other neighborhoods, I'm sure, in our zone that deserve this type of attention. So that's my concern about the rules. There's a wholesale expansion of the possibilities of building up. And within the 5% in the zone, it could be 5% on one street. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Brief one, yep.
I'm Bud Klein, I also live where Dick does. Am I to understand that this is not, since this is not a public meeting, I can't remind the group that we're the public and you're public servants? I'd like to get that point across because we're not being served. Round Hill Road is being...
I would take issue with you. I'm a volunteer.
I understand you. I sympathize with you. You are a public servant in your position you are. And I want it to be understood that Round Hill Road is not being treated as the public. It's being dictated to. The very things you were saying are the things that I perceive shouldn't have been done to Round Hill Road. And I think you were in fact saying that implying that you take a neighborhood with probably the most historic place in town and are destroying the history by putting in supposedly 38 two-bedroom apartments. 38 two-bedroom apartments was this whole basis of discussion. In two-bedroom apartments.
Yeah, we're not talking about that.
That's a different issue.
We're talking about it right now. Just to bring to your attention something, 38 two-bedroom apartments are not going to result in 38 people coming in. There's going to be at least 76, and possibly twice that number, because whatever the rents are, if they're divided by 4, the local professional young people, the graduate students, and so forth, are going to be moving in there. You're going to need space with over 150 people. Just be reminded of you. 38 people, you can't look on their faces. You're smiling, but you're not living there.
I'm smiling because you're the gentleman who compared
neighborhood.
Opal to the My Lai massacre.
What
And
did you
think you're the gentleman who sent us an email.
Yes.
That compared Opal to the My Lai massacre.
No, I didn't.
And I'm smiling because that was so ridiculous.
You folks to that. You're destroying
Okay,
the
let's
village.
wrap this up. Can I
Make
get
a motion to.
Just go home and think
Second.
about it.
Second. Favor?